This is the debate between Chris Alexander and Tim Felger, and they both agreed to have 2-minute responses back and forth, as moderated by myself. While we were gone, Chris, or Tim rather, made a comment. He said that there's no way you guys can come to a rational answer and find any common ground unless, Chris, you can see one particular point. Tim, what was that point?
Well, then I'm not talking about cocaine and marijuana. I'm not talking about crystal meth and gangs and murder and home invasion. I'm talking about drug prohibition.
All right, Chris, go ahead and respond.
Okay, well, I think he's going to need to define it a little more than that, because when we were previously talking, he was talking about all drugs being legal, and all drugs would include crystal meth. So now he's saying it's not about crystal meth and gangs and stuff like that. Well, the gangs and stuff like that, I'm not going to argue, but like the part I was concerned about was the crystal meth. So is that in or is it out? Like in crack cocaine, obviously,
yeah,
heroin.
Crystal meth, we should legalize or we should regulate, but for terms of a discussion, legalize crystal meth, crack cocaine, heroin, and marijuana, and street prostitution. They should all be regulated.
Well, so in order for us to have a debate, I need to accept that all of those things can be legalized. Isn't that kind of circular?
Not really, because
that's the point you're trying to prove.
No, I'm saying that take out the street prostitution, although the causation of that is drug prohibition. What we're talking about is drug prohibition, and we're not talking about crack cocaine, and we're not talking about crystal meth. We're talking about drug prohibition, the government policy that makes drugs illegal. Prohibition, right? Just like alcohol.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Well, that's almost a bit like cheating, because when you're talking drug prohibition, you're kind of you're using the word prohibition, which kind of equates it to alcohol prohibition. But you want to talk about apples and oranges. Alcohol, the difference between gin and rum and whiskey is not synonymous with drugs, where the difference between crack cocaine, marijuana, and ecstasy. One of those things is not like the other. So I'm not going to agree that you can blanket all of drug prohibition by just calling it drug prohibition. There are different levels of severity to drugs, unlike alcohol prohibition, where it's gin, whiskey, beer. They're all the same freaking thing. They all have the same pharmacological effect on the human body, whereas methamphetamines and marijuana have a very different effect on the human body. So no, I'm not going to agree to that, and nice try.
Okay. You don't have to agree with that. We can take each drug separately as we regulate them, and the regulations for crystal meth will be different than the regulations for marijuana. But what we're talking about is what causes the home invasion, what causes the murder, what causes the gang, what causes the violence and the criminality in our community, what's the causation of the street prostitution? And the answer is it's a government policy called drug prohibition. Now do you understand?
Oh, okay. Oh, well, we've agreed on that before. I'm 100% against, like, the overall idea of this. Even the very title of this war on drugs is ludicrous. It's a war. Well, for starters, it's a war you can't win. It's a war with no recognized enemy. Do I think it's most, a huge contributing factor in all those things you listed, like gangs and prostitution and murder? Absolutely. Do I think there needs to be a solution that, goes the way of the opposite way of prohibition? Absolutely. But it's just a matter of degrees of how far we want to go, and that's where you and I start to disagree a bit.
Okay, but we agree that we're talking about drug prohibition, and we're not talking about legalizing crystal meth. We're talking about attacking the problem with social programs and harm reduction as opposed to enforcement, police enforcement. Right?
Well, yeah, we can definitely agree on the fact that as it stands right now, the war on drugs is not working. It's a massive drain on our economy, and it's causing a lot more ills than it's solving. We can definitely agree on that, and that something needs to be done. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, then where do you start? The thing is that you start with bringing the information forward, and this is one thing I haven't been allowed to do. And besides that whole argument there, when we're talking about drug prohibition, let's don't forget like the complicity of the CIA and the cocaine democracies down in South America. Are we in agreement that the CIA is complicit in all the drug dealing?
Well, I mean, they were proven complicit in several cases. Definitely, like what was it back in the 80s when they were selling it on the street to finance their war in Nicaragua. So I mean, there's definitely, I mean, the conspiracies about the CIA, that's all fine and well, but I mean, you want to focus on solutions, not on conspiracy theories. You want to talk about, social programs that'll help solve the drug problem, not just pointing fingers at the CIA for something they did a while ago and might still be doing.
Well, I would like to contend that it wasn't something they did a while ago, and it wasn't an isolated incident, that there's a massive drug dealing organization in place, and that, this is funding a lot of the terrorist squads and stuff like that that are being put out. They're buying a lot of elections. I would even go so far as to say the BC Liberals and the federal Conservatives are complicit in the drug dealing.
Okay, but I mean, that's the kind of thing where you've got to have a lot of evidence for it. And I mean, the case against the CIA, they made the case back in the 80s, but I haven't heard anything since, and I haven't heard anything against the BC Liberals.
Well, that's because you aren't listening. But the BC Liberals, Christy Clark and that Colin Hanson, they both resigned just before the election, and they were up to their ears in that. Christy Clark, her husband and brother, got arrested for cocaine trafficking and marijuana smuggling and stuff like that. And there was just an article this week where Prime Minister Stephen Harper accepted the resignation of the Foreign Minister Maximum Bernier or something like that after it was revealed that Bernier had been rather careless with sensitive government documents in the presence of his Hells Angels affiliated girlfriend. I mean, it's all there. If people want to accept just a little bit of faith, you have more faith that your government's telling you the truth about marijuana than you do that your government's an evil piece of shit that will do anything to kill you.
Well, if I can interrupt just for a sec, Chris, didn't you tell me once, Tim, that you think that Stephen Harper might be a member of the Illuminati?
He is. He's taken the Illuminati oath, and the judge that you interviewed for the human rights told you that. Am I right?
He said something to that effect. Chris, what is your response?
Well, I would say that this is kind of the classic mentality that goes with people who are into conspiracy theories. And again, I'm not trying to be hostile or derogatory here, but it's where you have isolated. Just let me make my point, then you can respond. I'll be quick here. You got isolated incidents within a government where, like, what was the one you said? A person's brother, who's not in the government, but it's his or her brother, is doing something with drugs, or one guy in the government may be doing something with drugs. To go from that to the entire government is involved in a mass conspiracy to administer the illegal drug trade to, for whatever means, like, there's a huge logical leap. Like the case in the CIA back in the 1980s, that was a case where they proved it wasn't just one guy in the CIA. That was the entire CIA. It was selling cocaine in order to finance an illegal war in Nicaragua or wherever it was, and they proved that. But when you're trying to make the same claim about the BC Liberals or the Canadian government, you have to have that same kind of evidence. And a person's brother or one person in the government, that's evidence that they're the occasional bad apple in the government. That doesn't mean, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You gotta have a little more evidence than just a couple of guys over a couple of years were dealing drugs. I mean, that just doesn't do it for you.
Stop there. In 1941, the U.S. Army went to the New York State Prison and got Lucky Luciano out of jail, and in exchange for him giving him information about how to infiltrate Italy in the invasion, and he later became the heroin kingpin. And as we got involved in Vietnam, and we established the CIA base in Laos that later became the headquarters for the heroin distribution and manufacture center, he became the international kingpin of heroin. Now that started in 1941. Now I don't mean to beg and split hairs with you, but I would contend that if they started dealing drugs and they were dealing drugs in 1941 with Lucky Luciano, they probably got caught in 1988 again because they were still dealing drugs.